Welcome to the Explode Your Quote series, where we take quotations from the text that you are studying and blow up individual words and phrases in order to analyse them in more depth and detail. I use the term explode because it requires you to blow up the language into smaller pieces, for you to work out the meaning of words and phrases and make interpretations. Exploding the quotation helps you to pinpoint word classes and really think about the writer's choices of language and the effect these individual words and phrases have on us as a reader. This time I'll be looking at Inspector Goole from Inspector Calls. And Inspector Calls was written by J.B. Priestley and focuses on the Berlin family, a middle-class capitalist family who were interrogated by a mysterious inspector about the death of a young, pretty and charming working-class girl named Eva Smith. The inspector plays the most important role and controls and moves forward the drama throughout the play. In the stage directions at the beginning of the play, we get a feeling of the impact the inspector will have. Priestley describes how the lighting should change from pink and intimate until the inspector arrives, and then it should be brighter and harder. This change of lighting would be effective as it would automatically change the atmosphere of the scene. Pink can be associated with the feeling of calmness, charm, and it offers a romanticised view of the Berlins and their celebrations. By changing this to a brighter and harder lighting when the inspector arrives, shatters this illusion, and it shows that the inspector is there to shine a light on the facade of respectability that upper Edwardian society valued. He forces the Berlin family to reveal the dark secrets they wish would have stayed hidden. The brightness of the light can highlight the feeling of interrogation. The fact that it's described as being harder conveys the probing of the Berlins will be harsh and forceful. It can also reflect his personality and his intentions. His aim is to look harder at the Berlin family and injustice of the class system. Just before the inspector's entrance, Mr. Berlin is given a speech about every man looking after himself. The stage directions tell us we hear the sharp ring of a doorbell, and Berlin stops to listen. This indicates the arrival of the inspector. By the ring of the doorbell interrupting Berlin's speech about a man looking after himself and his own shows the inspector is there to interrupt the family's views about social responsibility. Priestley deliberately does this. This not only creates dramatic tension, but shows the inspector's authority even before he enters on stage, and makes him seem like an omniscient power. The sharp ring acts as the rude awakening. Sharp means something that is sudden or abrupt, or can cut or pierce, suggesting the inspector is there to cut through the selfish capitalist views of the Berlin family and leave an effect on them. When the inspector enters, Priestley gives a detailed description of the inspector in the stage directions. He states how he's a man in his 50s, dressed in a plain darkish suit of the period. He speaks carefully, weightily, and has a disconcerting habit of looking hard at the people he addresses before actually speaking. So let's look carefully at this quotation. When exploding a quote, you should be zooming in on particular words or phrases and blowing up the language into smaller pieces. You should be identifying word classes, whether it's a verb, adjective, noun, etc., uncovering a denotation, the meaning of the word, exploring the connotations, so what we associate with the word, and analysing the effect that this has on the audience and the writer's ideas, drawing on the connection this has to the context. Look at the example of the exploded quote. Word classes are in blue, denotations are in orange, connotations in yellow, and effect and writer's ideas in black. As you can see, it is possible to write a lot about a little. So let's unpack this. Priestley states that the inspector should be dressed in a plain darkish suit. Remember, An Inspector Calls is a play that was made to be seen rather than read. Therefore, the inspector's costume is important. By dressing him in a plain suit, makes him visually contrast to the tails and white ties of the Berlin men and Gerald. The other characters' costumes represents their wealth and class, and emphasises the idea that appearance is important to them. The inspector's suit juxtaposes this idea and shows how his focus is not on the appearance of things, but on reality. While the Berlins want to show they live a life of extravagance, The audience do not identify the inspector as either rich or poor. The simplicity of his costume portrays him as a man not assigned to a social class. The use of the adverb, word class, carefully, which means something that is done with accuracy or caution, deliberately avoiding errors, this is denotation, implies how the inspector is careful in his interrogation of the Berlins in order to seek the truth. This is the connotations. The adverb weightily means have great power or influence, and something done in a serious manner, which suggests the inspector is serious in his message about social change, and his power to influence the younger generation, in particular, characters like Sheila and Eric. He metaphorically puts pressure on the Berlins. By using the adjective disconcerting to describe how the inspector looks at people, portrays how he's able to make the Berlins feel unsettled, displaying the confidence and the authority he possesses. Just like the lighting suggests at the beginning of the play, the inspector is looking hard at the Berlin family and their flaws. Priestley wanted us to look hard at ourselves too. Priestley then goes on to describe what the actor should be like when playing the inspector. Need not be a big man, but he creates at once an impression of massiveness, solidity, and purposefulness. Again, follow the explode the quote method. I have zoomed into the language and blown up words and phrases into smaller pieces. Priestley uses a rule of three here with massiveness, solidity, and purposefulness to describe the inspector. The noun massiveness is defined as something solid or substantial, great or imposing. This can link to the massive presence he has in the play and on the Berlins, where he forces them to face the truth. This is followed by the nouns solidity and purposefulness, which can convey the firmness in the inspector's socialist beliefs and his moral purpose, for the Berlins and the middle class to make a change and be socially responsible. It also shows he won't be swayed from his mission. He's gone with a plan and nothing's done by accident. His order of interrogation, the show in the photograph, and his line of questions are all done with purpose. By stating that the inspector need not be a big man, but he creates at once an impression, Priestley may have wanted to show the ability the inspector has in commanding the situation through his manner and methods, and not through his physical stature. Before the inspector leaves, he delivers a monologue to the Berlin family, warning them that if they do not learn from their mistakes, they'll be taught in fire and blood and anguish. Through apocalyptic imagery, Priestley creates a vision of hell on earth if society, particularly those from the middle upper class and those in government, do not change their selfish ways. The use of synthetic listing is effective in showing the continued suffering and reoccurrence of war if no change is made. Here, the inspectors make an allusion to World War I and World War II, which an audience in 1945 would have just experienced. He would be very aware that the audience would be made up of women who could be maids like Edna, women who worked in factories like Eva, women who would remember how voiceless they were in 1912. There'd also be men who had just returned from war, men affected by PTSD, men who had lost limbs, best friends and family. But an inspector ending on his final line would be impactful on the audience as he voices his concerns and the concerns of the working class about the injustice of society. Like the Berlins, we're left to speculate what he was and his role in the play. Some could view him as being a godlike figure, providing divine intervention for the Berlin family and the audience. This idea is also shown earlier when the inspector refers to society as members of one body, which alludes to Corinthians chapter 12, lines 12 to 27, which says, "Just as a body has many parts, but all its many parts form one body, there should be no division in the body, but that its parts should have equal concern for each other. If one part suffers, every part suffers with it." This conveys how Priestley is playing on the Christian values of 1940s society in order to remind them of their responsibility and Christian ideals. Priestley was also very interested in time travel and wrote many plays involving ideas of time. He was interested in the work of both Uspensky and Donne. Uspensky suggested when we die, we come back and relive the same life. This life will be repeated unless we learn something, making some moral or spiritual improvement. If we made significant changes, we would eventually escape this cycle and into a new life in which we did not repeat our mistakes. Donne suggested we could have the ability to look back and see forward in time. This would mean we could see the actions which led to present situations and see the consequences of our actions. This would mean we had the chance to change past actions and avoid the consequences of this. We see these ideas in Inspector Calls. The inspector gives the Berlin family a chance to reflect on the actions of their past in order to avoid the consequences in the future. However, some of them do not learn from this, and we see the events start all over again, with the death of a girl and the arrival of another inspector. Therefore, it can be suggested the inspector is not fixed to one time and has unworldly clairvoyant abilities. It can also be suggested that the inspector is a ghost-like figure. His name is Goole. Although it's spelled Goole, it's a homophone and can also mean the ghoul, as in a spirit or a person interested in death or disaster, reminding us that he's only interested in the death of Eva Smith. The fact that Gerald discovers that there's no Inspector Goole working for the Bromley police also adds to the idea that he's not real and could be a ghostly figure. So that's the character Inspector analysed for you. Why don't you try answering the following question? How does Priestley use the character of the inspector to present his own ideas and attitudes about social injustice? Before you begin your response, remind yourself of each assessment objective. For AO1, you must show your understanding of the text and the task, give a range of well-selected quotations, and give your own personal response. AO2 requires you to analyse language structure and form, use subject terminology, and explore the effect on the audience and the writer's ideas. For AO3, you must look at the connection between the context and the text. It would be best to write the assessment objectives at the top of your paper to act as a checklist. When you finish, I suggest going through your response and checking you've used all the AOs. You need to make sure you have used all of them throughout your response, particularly AO1 and AO2, which is worth 12 marks each. So why don't you share your responses below, because sharing is caring. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel. You can find more tips and resources on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter.